From the 1011 Now streaming studio in Lincoln, Nebraska, this is the REPORT Husker Show, sponsored by Fat Dog's Convenience Store.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Jessica Blum here in the 1011 streaming studio alongside 1011 Sports Director Kevin Sjuts here this afternoon, November 13th, talking a little bit about the star-studded recruits we have in this 2026 class coming up. We've got the future really looking bright, I think, in Lincoln, from the powerhouse women's volleyball team reloading with top-tier talent to Fred Hoiberg adding key pieces to the men's basketball roster, and Amy Williams building momentum for women's hoops. There's a lot to talk about, really.
Are we going to start there? Start with Amy?
Should we?
I think we should.
I think we should, too.
This is the 7th-ranked recruiting class in women's basketball. So Nebraska lands number 7 throughout women's basketball. It's the best recruiting job Amy's done in Nebraska, and any coach has done in Nebraska women's basketball history. And this comes on the heels of signing Britt Prince 2 years ago, who was one of the top recruits ever signed in the program's history. They're getting another 5-star next year. You see her on this screen, Ashlyn Kopel. She's from South Dakota. In fact, from Lincoln. If you want to go watch her, for anybody who's like that, it's less than 4 hours. It's right on the southern edge of South Dakota, north of O'Neill, Nebraska.
No way.
I'm not going to say it's 10-11 territory, but where she calls home, it is less than a 4-hour drive from Lincoln. So you could explore some.
The fun fact.
Yeah. And she's a dynamic athlete. This is a huge get. When she committed a few months ago, I think there were a lot of basketball fans that their eyes really opened up. Like, Nebraska's doing something right here on the recruiting trail. She's a forward. She can play outside. She can play inside. She's had a lot of success. She was one of the top players in South Dakota last year as a junior. I believe she averaged over 25 points as a junior, pulled down a ton of rebounds. And nationally, Jessica, she's the 22-ranked player in this recruiting cycle nationally. So she's good. She's a 5-star. And, by the way, she's a really good student, 4.0 GPA.
Well, and you brought up Britt Prince, too, and I think that's what brought a lot of excitement personally in me watching Husker sports and going to UNL, just knowing she was a local girl and then coming onto the team, and she's done a lot. She did a lot in high school, and now she's brought a lot to the team. So I think that Kopel could do a lot of the same things, knowing that she has a little tie into Nebraska, but then that she's so highly recruited.
She's a Midwestern girl, and not to say that makes or breaks a player that's good at Nebraska, but on the topic of Britt Prince and having just that homegrown element, you look at what's behind. I'm just wondering, and I'm glad we're doing this discussion today rather than yesterday, because you can digest some of the information. And I'm trying to figure out, like, what's behind Nebraska's push in recruiting with women's basketball. Of course, NIL and revenue sharing, some of that stuff is a part of the discussion. But I would take it in a different direction and say, look at some of the players that have really been at the front and center of Nebraska women's basketball over the past 5 years. Alexis Markowski, Jazz Shelley, and now Britt Prince. These are all players that have represented the program in a very positive light and have been very public figures, and they've been really good basketball players as well. And they always played very well in the media, too. And I don't think that that's something that we should overshadow or overlook, because Alexis always said the right things, and you saw her out in the community. And Jazz, even with her Australian accent, she could say something that's kind of like bland, but she made it very playful and fun. And I just feel like all of these things are lining up. Not to mention the women's basketball has been pretty good. The team went to the Big Ten championship game a couple of years ago. They went to the NCAA tournament last year. So there's just so much momentum there for Amy Williams in this women's basketball program. And now they land Ashlyn Kopel, who's really, really, really good. Ava Miles, who's out of Missouri, and Maddie Stewart out of Oklahoma. Miles is a high school All-American. And then Maddie Stewart, if you look at her numbers, nothing is like, wow, but she does everything. And she's going to be one of those pieces. I would even liken her to like a Jess Petrie. She can play in so many different roles. Or Isabella Bourne from a few years ago. I'm excited about these 3 players joining Nebraska.
I was going to ask you actually this afternoon, just you look at Husker media, and you've covered it for a while. How much does the fan base and how much they can get behind women's basketball, football. We can touch on, of course, men's basketball and volleyball too. On social media, you can see a lot of fans flocking to these announcements, welcoming people. Do you think the players are getting a sense of that, and that draws people to Nebraska?
Yeah, it's good and bad. The social media game, especially with recruiting, there's a negative side to it that we don't need to spend too much time. But I think everybody knows. When people commit, there will be fans from opposing fan bases that thought they were going to get that player that sometimes they can't resist getting behind the keyboard and saying something nasty and mean. You see it more in, frankly, men's sports. In female sports, you don't see it as much. But the love that these three individuals received on social media on Wednesday, it was pretty heartwarming, right? There were so many Nebraska fans. And I think that they already know just the passion of Nebraska fans, just based on the visits. And then also, you look at who's representing the University of Nebraska out on the recruiting trail.
Yeah.
When you have Amy Williams and Amanda Hart and like that coaching staff, they're good people. And I think that they kind of wear that Husker badge and everybody sees it. And it really helps give these players a pretty good picture of what they're signing up for before they make their college decision.
You also took to X and said how Amy Williams deserves more credit for pulling in these recruits. And can you speak a little bit more to that and what prompted you to say that?
Well, look at the class first and foremost. All three of these players are top 100 recruits, and this is the 7th-ranked recruiting class. And I don't think people, frankly, like I said on social media, Jessica, that they don't give Amy Williams credit. And maybe that's because people don't associate women's basketball coaches, or at least here, with recruiting, except for like, can you get the big fish? Well, Amy has done that now again, and she's done it multiple times. So I think fans should they enjoy her as a coach, and they enjoy her just as the face of the women's basketball program. I think that they need to start recognizing her skill on the recruiting trail, because recruiting at Nebraska in women's basketball, it's not easy. Recruiting Nebraska is not easy. It's flyover country. And sometimes to get recruits to come to Nebraska, it's tough to get them just on campus. And we've heard many coaches that have, since left, been fired, retired, whatever, like they will speak to. There are just logistical challenges for being a national brand, because getting players here to witness Nebraska and then hopefully falling in love with the fan base, it is tough. And you got to book out a lot of time to get your family here, if that's the case, and all that. But Amy's really been able to identify talent in the region. She's able to get them here, and now she's able to convince them to come here. Prior to this little stretch over the past maybe 5 to 7 years, the big Nebraska recruit was Jessica Shepard, but she's from Nebraska. And when she signed, it was a huge, huge deal. And she was really good before she decided to transfer and then finish out her college career at Notre Dame. But that was a major headline tying together recruiting and Nebraska women's basketball. Now it's becoming almost a yearly thing, because Amy and her staff have done such a great job on the recruiting trail. I guess that's my point overall, and what prompted me to post something publicly was that it happened every now and again with a couple of big players. But now there's just some consistency with landing players, and I think the credit goes to the head coach.
She's putting Nebraska kind of back on the map with women's basketball.
Or at least making some of the other teams across the Big Ten, the Big 12, like Nebraska, when a recruit says, I'm considering Nebraska, opposing coaches have to take that pretty seriously now, because Amy has proven she can get these players.
Absolutely. Well, putting a foot in the paint, pivoting a little bit, let's go to men's basketball now, since we're kind of on the basketball side of things. The other recruits from Fred Hoiberg's team, 2 additions that we're looking at, 2 4-star recruits, and Jacob Lanier, and Colin Rice, both 6'6" and 6'8".
These are quintessential Fred Hoiberg basketball players. There's nobody that towers. There's nobody that's small. There's nobody that neither one of them are small. They can play on the wing, they can take it to the hole, and they can shoot the basketball. And, for what Fred wants, he's getting. He's not just going to take the best player. Of course he would. But he wants to get guys that can fit into his system. He likes to play with pace, he likes to play with tempo, and he likes guys that can shoot it. And, there's going to be some openings on the court next year with Nebraska basketball. Rink Mast is going to graduate. Sam Hoiberg is going to graduate. And, of course, the transfer portal can always change some things, too. But when you bring in guys like Colin Rice and Jacob Lanier, both 4 stars, again, talk about giving coaches some credit. Fred's not just adding a couple of players because he has a couple of roster spots open. No, he's getting good players and players that fit his system. So I would say it's mission accomplished with the men's basketball team in this recruiting cycle.
When you hear this news, I don't know if it's just me, it's a funny thing. The meme kind of circulates. Have you seen the Fred Hoiberg on the phone?
Absolutely.
Picture? That's where my mind goes when you hear headlines like this.
I think that picture, don't quote me on this, but I think it originated at like the junior college Final Four. Like
really?
Fred was in the crowd. And the great thing about the photo, for those that don't know it, hopefully you can find it, and it shouldn't take you long to find the picture. But he's got his legs crossed. He's lounged back. He's clearly in a high school or some sort of gym, right? And there's a basketball game in front of him, and he's got the phone right up to his ear. And it is just I've got good news. I'm chilling. I'm watching basketball, but I'm also working, and I've got a good thing on the other side of the phone.
Search does not take us right there, actually.
I think the problem was maybe you went to Google. I think if you go to Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, you can find it in short time.
You're right. It brings me joy to see that because it almost takes you back to Taken vibes. I will find you. I think finding these recruits, I will find you wherever you're at. But as I maybe look up that and kind of bring that for fun maybe later in the broadcast, Jacob is from what I see, Arkansas. Yeah.
Jacob is from, I'm not going to try to say the name of the town in Arkansas, but he's at Parkview Magnet High School in Arkansas. He's the shorter of the two, more of a true wing player, 6'6". Colin Rice can get inside a little bit more with a little bit more size. The big challenge with bringing these guys into a Big Ten program like Nebraska is developing their game from a defensive standpoint. They're both really good offensive players, but in the Big Ten, you got to be able to body up. You got to play physical. But that's where coaches will welcome players that have good skill sets, and that now it's the coach's job to get them stronger, get them acclimated to a game at a little higher pace, and then also get them prepared for the physical toils of competing in the Big Ten.
And then Colin made the pick for Nebraska over Iowa, didn't he? Can you speak a little bit to that?
Well, Colin was not just Iowa. He had a number of offers across the Big Ten. I know Illinois was involved, Northwestern was involved, and I believe some of the other Division I programs in Iowa were interested in Colin Rice as well. Fred's really, he obviously has roots in Iowa. He's not afraid to go back there. And, Price Sandford being on the team this year, transferring from Iowa, and he's now in the Nebraska starting rotation. So Fred has connections in that state. He's not afraid to pick up that phone, right, and make the phone calls that he needs just to try to get the guys.
To find it, Kevin.
This is disappointing.
I know. I'm usually really good at, with severe weather, other things. I can pinpoint things pretty quickly, but Twitter, it's just because we're talking about it.
We'll blame it on the new algorithms.
I like that idea. Well, also, we have to talk about women's volleyball, too, and the 3 recruits that are coming for Danny Busboom Kelly. John Cook heavily recruited at least one, if not all of these.
John landed all 3 of them. Danny keeps them all, and it's you're going to be hard-pressed to find a volleyball recruit that commits to Nebraska and then changes her mind.
Right.
Because, as of right now, why would you turn your back on Nebraska? Maybe playing time, but Danny has proven it doesn't matter what the team looks like. She's finding ways to get everyone on the court. Nebraska this year has 17 players on the roster, the largest roster in program history.
Really?
14 players have appeared in a game, at least one game this year. And even, I hate to say Manaya Obeche is the 3rd string middle blocker because she would be a starter anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue she could be potentially an All-American. She's Nebraska's 3rd in line at middle blocker. Danny's still finding a way to get her on the court. Campbell Flynn, who was, the National Player of the Year last year, backup setter this year to Bergen Riley. She's still finding ways to get Campbell on the floor this year. And that's what Danny and this coaching staff is being challenged with. You can't just have good players sit on the bench. Because if you do, guess what? They're gone. Because they can play somewhere else.
Right.
And if you're playing somewhere else, you're probably making money somewhere else too, It's just a new age of college volleyball, and I've been asked by so many people, how would John Cook have handled this season? I don't even like to entertain that conversation. I just embrace what Danny is doing because it is so unique. It is very 2025, and it's been super fun to watch. So as these three players come on campus next year, actually they'll come in January to report for winter conditioning, and then they'll be here for the spring season. It's hard to say if anybody's going to redshirt. If you can play, and Danny's going to, turn you loose. There's no doubt about that. And the three players that they have right here, Keone Williams, she's a middle blocker. So Andy Jackson still has another year of eligibility. Manaya Obeche is a freshman this year. Rebecca Alec will graduate. So, you're still going to have a three-person rotation at middle blocker. And then Jaden Robinson, some can contend that she is the headliner of this group. She can absolutely smash the ball, as can Gabby DeVita. And one thing that's been really cool for me, I've seen a few of these players play already before arriving on campus because they've been at some club tournaments that I have attended with my daughter. It's the same grade. So there was one time that my daughter played on the same court as Gabby DeVita in back-to-back matches. I stayed there and I watched Gabby, and I took a little video and put it out on social media and have connected with her father as well. And so this is a great recruiting class, number 3 in the country, and nobody is surprised. Okay, since you brought it up, can you speak a little bit to how proud you are probably of your daughter and how she's been doing in high school sports and what this season meant for you? Yeah, I'm proud of her. Of course, mom and dad are, seeing a kid reach their goals are their goals. They're not our goals. We have tried to help pave the path to allow Bella to pursue whatever she wants to pursue. And Wednesday signing day in the Sjuts household was a little different than all the other ones. I'm always active on signing day, but just in a different capacity this week. So, kind of fun that her path has helped connect me with these future Nebraska players. It does. And if you have a love for volleyball and you're hearing the players for Nebraska talk about their practices, you just fall in love with this sport, I think, all over again. Because like you touched on, Danny Busboom-Kelly is getting everyone in. She's getting different looks and different lines playing together, so everyone's getting playing time in practice, and it sets them up for success in these games where she can throw in more players depending on where the game is going. One of the fun discussions I like to have with fans at the Devaney Center is, how do you feel being a season ticket holder? Because, one, you might be disappointed that you don't see Bergen Riley set all 3 sets of a match. You might be really excited, though, because you get to see Campbell Flynn. It's a darned if you do, darned if you don't kind of situation. There is some excitement that you don't even know who's going to be on the court. Libero in particular. That's so true. When you go to a match, you don't know if it's going to be Lainey Choboy in the Libero jersey or if it will be Olivia Mauk. So there's some uniqueness and there's some fun and mystery with every time Nebraska volleyball takes the court. But I also know as if you're a season ticket holder and you're going time and time again, you know what? You might want to watch Rebecca Alex swing as much as she possibly can, or Andy Jackson. But that's not the case with the way that they've managed this team, because they've taken them off the court. And you see those other players come up, and you realize their potential. I think people deserve to know what other potential is out there on the team, because it does give the credit back to the coach and Danny Busboom-Kelly's season and what she's doing to craft these players. Yeah, and this is the way that the roster has been managed this year. It's something that John Cook did not do. Would he sub? Yes, but not to this extent. Right. But then again, Danny has a very different situation on her hands with trying to keep this insanely talented roster happy. It also gives fans a little sneak peek into the future, because if you're seeing Campbell Flynn set the way she is right now in part-time as a freshman, it makes you think when Bergen graduates in 2 years, if Campbell's still here on campus, and I think that's the whole design behind all of this, Nebraska's going to be just fine, because she's going to be a pretty elite setter when her career reaches the final couple of seasons. I haven't had time to tell you this, but I used to work for Nebraska Athletics in the ticket office, and it's just incredible to see how hard those tickets are to get for other fans to come in, because there's just generations that are sitting within that Devaney Center and want to see these next recruit classes come up. What is Nebraska going to do next? Because it's impressive on a national level, let alone on a global level when you go back to volleyball day. Yeah, and on that topic, tickets are going to be very different next year, because there's now a donation element, and you can sign up for different levels of giving. And what it's not about will you get a ticket? Because I've sat in on some meetings with the folks that make those decisions within Nebraska Athletics. They're pretty confident if you want season tickets for Nebraska volleyball next year, you will get them. you may not get the seat you want. And I think that's the bigger discussion and feeling of discontent from some longtime season ticket holders that, over the course of time, they've been able to hold a seat that's in row, let's say 12 at the Devaney Center. Great seat, right? But now, in order to have that one particular seat, you might not get the opportunity if you don't give it a certain level to be in a spot on the rotation in which they're going to draft who selects their seats.
Maybe hinting at something we'll have to talk about as we get closer to.
Yeah, it's a pretty complicated thing. I feel like I've been pretty well educated on it because I've been invited to sit in on a few of those meetings. So yeah, it's going to be very unique. Not to mention, for the folks that are like, I never get to see them. There's going to be more opportunities next year. Nothing has formally been announced, but there will be more than a couple of matches played at Pinnacle Bank Arena. I feel pretty confident in that. In fact, Nebraska may play NCAA tournament matches here next month inside PBA.
Something to look at.
There have been some pretty strong discussions regarding that. I would not be surprised if that's the case. So instead of 8,000 people watching Nebraska volleyball, it could go up to 15. And that would be one of the main reasons why. And plus, with opening the season at the ABCA First Serve at Pinnacle Bank Arena, Nebraska proved that, one, they can pull it off, two, what the environment's going to be like.
Great venue.
And it's not like a downgrade in environment. It just feels different. And Danny has been a strong supporter of playing matches inside Pinnacle Bank Arena, mostly because it gets more people inside the building, and it just allows more people to be a part of what they have to offer. She's a little puzzled why it's restricted to just the 8,000. And, as she was building the program at Louisville, they play in a small gym. But when they had big matches, they moved it out of their small home gym and they went to the KFC Yum Center. So what Nebraska could do with utilizing both the Devaney Center and Pinnacle Bank Arena, it is eerily similar to what Danny did with her growing program while she was there at Louisville.
And it kind of goes back to, because she was playing in the Coliseum days, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was.
And then we went to Devaney after that. So it's interesting to see that we're talking about now another shift. And you got to talk about the younger generation. I think a lot of those are seats to be filled in which you can move to a bigger venue, and then you support a lot more younger kids coming from. Volleyball day was something to behold.
Right.
And you're seeing all those schools taking off in the middle of the week to come to Lincoln to experience that, let alone now they get more of an opportunity on a regular basis that a lot of them can now plan more trips because there will be seats available for them to take.
Yeah, you just made a great point. Danny played in the Coliseum. It was 4,000 people. I mean, it was impossible to drive down Vine Street on those nights. The one thing about the Coliseum, and I'm a Coliseum holds a special place in my heart. I love that place, and for a number of reasons. It was of the three venues that we've mentioned here: the Coliseum, the Devaney Center, and Pinnacle Bank Arena. It's not even a debate what the loudest is. It was like you would leave the Coliseum with your ears ringing. Now, granted, navigating through the concourse was very tough, and you had to wait a long time to get in, and sometimes the seats weren't very good, but it was deafening in there, and the floor would shake, and it was so vibrant, and it was awesome. But only 4,000 people went, and when they moved out of the Coliseum and into the Devaney Center, like they pretty much doubled their capacity. It's like, are they going to be able to say yes? Yeah. The sellout streak is in no jeopardy with Nebraska volleyball, and they've created their own unique, fun little environment at the Devaney Center. Plus, they renovated it, and it is one of the premier venues in college volleyball. So if they can make that transition as successfully as they have done, I think everybody should have full confidence that a move from the Devaney Center to Pinnacle Bank Arena, not permanently, make sure that all of our viewers and listeners understand we're not advocating for this to be a permanent thing, right, but playing some matches over at PBA,
highlighting the I-80 match,
things
like that.
It makes too much sense.
Yes, I agree. I wanted you to take a step back, and there was a question I wanted to ask you. Overall, three sports, volleyball, men's basketball, and women's basketball, if you had to give me an overall grade, like in NFL drafts they do, ABCD grade, how do you think Nebraska would do?
On the signing class right now?
Yes, the 2026, who we've talked about.
Well, the volleyball, I'm going to give the women's basketball team an A+.
Okay.
I think like where the program is at right now, like it is an overachieving measure to get the 7th ranked recruiting class nationally and have all 3 of those players inside the national top 100. So I'm going to give women's basketball A+. I'm going to give volleyball. I mean, they're 3rd nationally, so that's should be an A+. Okay, I'll give volleyball an A+, women's basketball an A++ with some extra credit, and then I'll give Fred Hoiberg a B+.
Okay. I like where that it gives everyone a frame of mind.
And I have to just do that for Fred because he didn't get a 5-star. I mean, shame on Fred and his staff.
I was gonna say,
good
if
grief.
You're hearing this, Fred. Sounds like Kevin thinks you should. No, it's okay.
You got 2 4-star recruits and you don't get an A.
Hey, before we go, Kevin, is there anything you can sneak peek on what you're working on today for the 6 and 10 end reports tonight?
Yeah, we're talking a little bit about Nebraska women's basketball beating Creighton last night by 34 points. What an impressive performance. Going to spotlight Bergen Riley. She's in the conversation for National Player of the Year and just quietly so steady, so good. But she's changed her game a little bit, Jessica, and we're going to talk about that during our newscast tonight. And then it's not in the shows tonight, but, of course, Nebraska football's on the bye this week. They're catching their breath and getting some young guys some reps at practice, and then they'll get back to it next Monday when game week resumes against Penn State. They're off to Happy Valley and Matt Rule's alma mater next Saturday. We still don't know a game time, which is a little bit frustrating for anybody trying to plan their weekend. Not this one, but next one. I have a hunch it's going to be 11 a.m.
Ooh, we haven't had many of those this season yet.
Have not. And part of that, I just don't see that game being a primetime game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that game being in the 2:30 slot because that would be the CBS contest. Penn State's on CBS this week. I don't think they're going to take them in back-to-back weeks. So by process of elimination, I'm leaning 11 a.m. for Nebraska-Penn State kickoff. However, the 3 o'clock FS1 option is still a possibility.
And we'll likely hear about that after this weekend's slate of games. So maybe Sunday, early next week. That
Probably
we'll hear from that.
It probably either comes out late Saturday night,
Okay.
but I think the more likely scenario will be Sunday morning.
Okay. Well,
They will wait till all of this week's games are concluded.
Right.
So if you're going to enjoy Nebraska's bye week, there's actually some pretty good football here this week across the Big Ten. The big game within the conference is Iowa taking on USC.
Good to know. Good to know. Well, that has been 10-11 Sports Director Kevin Sjuts joining us this afternoon for an edition of the End Report Husker Show. We always appreciate your time, Kevin. But we've been talking about the new recruits in Lincoln. Of course, we've got a lot more in terms of tennis recruits, softball, as well as soccer up on our 1011now.com website under the Sports tab. But the End Report, of course, is your home for Husker highlights and headlines. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the REPORT Husker Show, sponsored by Fat Dog's Convenience Store. Watch, listen, and stream on the 1011 Now app, on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more Husker coverage throughout the week, watch the End Report on 1011 Sports at 6 and 10.